Hello and welcome to another webinar from the Ability series. Today, we'll be talking about positive behavior support. We'll be discussing in detail evidence-based strategies and techniques to manage challenging behaviors in children with special needs. The session will be conducted by Dr. Marie Grace Gomez, who has a lot to tell you guys today, and I'll be talking more about her. But let us give a couple of more minutes for more of our friends to join us. Till then, why don't you all enjoy some good music? Great. So looks like most of you have joined us. And for those of you all who have joined us just a minute ago, I was telling the other participants that today's session topic would be positive behavior support. We'll be discussing in detail evidence-based strategies and techniques to manage challenging behaviors in children with special needs. The session will be conducted by Dr. Marie Grace Gomez, who has a lot to share from her years of experience with her qualification as PhD, RGC, LPG Professor 1, and a lot more, many things. I would be talking about her a little more in detail. Briefly, let me give you all a quick and brief introduction about Ability till then. For us as an organization, all carers of children with special needs are at the center of our universe. Our mission is to give every child an opportunity to thrive. And how we do that? By making resources more accessible, affordable, and effective for everyone. Of course, with the help of technology and collaboration with caregivers like you. How we use technology? Well, it is through technology that this platform is available for you all to access. You can simply visit app.ability.com and click on the resources tab here to visit and to benefit from hundreds of resources added by the Ability team members and other experts from around the world. We bring to you a host of other support systems as well, apart from resources such as community, so that no one of us should have to do this alone. Everyone should be given the chance to enable the best possible opportunity of discovering their child's true potential. And that's what we endeavor to do. Also with our YouTube channel and our Facebook page. Our YouTube channel has hundreds of useful videos by the experts. And to stay posted about the Ability updates, you can follow us on Facebook. The link to both of these things are being shared on the chat box right now. Apart from that, if you're interested in Ability events, one being like today, if you're interested in attending Ability webinars or workshops, you can again visit app.ability.com and tap on the events tab over here. This page has a list of all the upcoming events from Ability, be it workshops or webinars. Also, the past sessions are available under the on-demand section. So go ahead and benefit from it. All you need to do is, if you don't already have an Ability account, create an Ability account by registering for any one of these sessions, and then you would have a username and password. Log into your Ability account, and there you are. You can register for any of the future events by tapping on the Register Now button simply, and for watching the on-demand sessions, you can tap on the Watch Now button. Also, we have been conducting workshops across different learning paths, which are specially designed by experts along with Ability team. These workshops and learning paths cover different special need conditions, behavioral challenges, speech and language related challenges, motor skills, remedial education, and many more such topics. These workshops don't just cover the essential knowledge along with strategies and interventions, but also talk about different assessment tools, case studies, and activities. There's a lot in here to learn from, isn't it? And what is exciting is you could attend these workshops without paying anything. Yes, you heard that right. Ability is currently offering the premium membership, which allows you to attend any of these workshops for free for a whole 1 year. That means if you register for any of the ability workshops, you would have premium membership access until 31st July 2022. So now is the good time to take advantage of this offer and grab every opportunity to learn to be able to help children with special needs better. And now, without any further delays, coming to our event today, which will be conducted by Dr. Marie Grace Gomez. She's a Professor 1 at the Counselor Education Area, College of Education, University of Philippines, Diliman. She teaches counseling and research courses at the undergraduate and graduate levels. She holds several qualifications, including a doctorate in special education. She's a licensed professional teacher and registered guidance counselor. She has rich experience as a class teacher, guidance counselor, and administrator in the basic and tertiary education settings, assessing and managing children with disability and in conflict with laws. We are so very elated to have you here with us, Dr. Grace. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Swati, for that very warm introduction. I'd like to greet our viewers from all around the world. I saw here participants from Albania, from Thailand, from the Philippines, from Singapore, from India. So good evening, or I think it's evening right now, or if ever it's morning or afternoon, good afternoon or good morning to you. Thank you very much for spending the time with us here at Ability, and thank you very much for joining today's session. We will be talking about positive behavior supports. So, what is positive behavior supports? And we will be talking about positive behavior supports that can be beneficial for children with disabilities, and this can also be beneficial for regular learners. So, without further ado, I would be discussing positive behavior support. So, I'm sharing screen right now. Thank you very much for watching. So, what are positive behavior supports? Why do we need to support a child's behavior? Why is it important that we deal with behaviors that are unbecoming positively? We will be discussing some techniques right now. There are a lot of techniques that can be used that are grounded on various theories. But let's start with the basics here. I do understand that this is a mixed group. There are groups here that are experts already in the field. There are people from special education. There are parents, and we welcome the parents who participated in today's session. And of course, there are novice teachers. So I will have something for everyone today, and we'll be talking about positive behavior supports. Again, welcome to today's session. So when you say positive behavior supports, what does it mean? First and foremost, it promotes school safety and good behavior. So if you say it's a positive behavior support, we're talking about safety. If you have a child throwing tantrums, there could be unsafe behavior here. So we have to inculcate safety all the time. For example, if there is self-injurious behavior, there would definitely be a problem with the safety of the child himself or herself, and of course the safety of his or her classmates. And then we target good behavior, acceptable behavior at home or in the classroom. We also talk about behavior expectations and strategies. There are various expectations in the regular class, and of course, there are also expectations at home. So, we talk about all of these behavior expectations and strategies. And it is very important, if you are a parent, if you are a teacher, that you lay behavioral expectations at the beginning. And then, of course, the focus is on prevention. If you say it's positive behavior supports, it's more on prevention rather than intervention. How do you prevent other behaviors from happening? How do you prevent that behavior from ever occurring? And then it recognizes that students can only meet behavior expectations if and only if they know what the expectations are. A lot of times there would be kids who would be coming to me and they would tell me, you know what, I got punished by my parents today. And I would ask, why? I don't know why I got punished. So the children have to know behavior expectations. And if ever you will be giving punishment, the children or the students should know why they are being punished. That is very important. There are some guiding principles. So first, behavior expectations can be learned. Yes, this can be learned. Even for children with special needs, for children with autism, this can be learned. Next, expected behaviors can be taught. And one of the best techniques that you could use is modeling. If you are a parent, if you are a teacher, modeling appropriate behavior is a very powerful tool in order for children to learn behavior. Next, early intervention prevents more serious behavior problems. If you see that the child is misbehaving at age 3, at age 7, it would be easier to intervene rather than start intervention at age 16, age 17, age 19. That would be quite difficult. Behavior would be quite difficult to modify if you start intervention at age 19. Next, each student is different. You don't give one intervention to another student because each student is different. You have to assess. And later on, I'll be talking to you about the functions of behavior. You have to know the functions of behavior in order for you to identify what intervention to pick for that specific child. And then teaching behavior should always be based on research. It has to be evidence based. And if you say if it is based on research, you are talking about randomized clinical trials. That means that there were various experiments that were conducted. These are structured programs, structured protocols that were implemented, and these are tested at the clinical setting. And you have to obtain statistical significance. First is the effects, and then second, it has to be efficacious. It has to be long lasting. So, for example, if I test today, after 6 weeks that I implemented behavior strategy number one and I identified that there is a decrease in behavior, after 6 months, I have to test it again to check if it is efficacious. So it's one thing to have direct effects. There is a significant change right after the intervention. But number two, it's different when you talk about efficacy. That means that the behavior has been practiced and carried on for a longer period of time. So we always check on efficacy of behavior. Next, tracking a student's behavior progress is essential. This is so important, particularly in young kids or children with disability. You have to take note of how the behavior progresses. And also, if you create an intervention, you have to check if the student's behavior is indeed progressing day by day. Because, for example, you've been doing the same thing for 6 months already and nothing has changed, that is a sure indication that you have to change the intervention strategy. Next, schools gather and use data to make decisions about behavior interventions. And schools do have behavior charts. If you are a guidance counselor, you should have anecdotal reports. And there are also reports about behaviors. School staff members are consistent in how they encourage expected behavior and discourage misbehavior. That's why we have all of these school rules and we have regulations because there are behavior expectations inside the school. Now, let's first go to the literature. What does the literature say about positive behavior supports? We have here some professors, some PhDs. We start with the literature in order for us to learn more about positive behavior supports. So what I did was a metasynthesis of literature. I identified all the literature that has positive behavior support on Google Scholar. And I processed it in a software called NVivo. So I generated here a word cloud. And when you analyze word cloud, the bigger the font, the more prominent the font, the more times it occurs in the literature. So you have here school is at the center and behavior. That means that PBS is mostly used in school. And yes, we are in a quarantine setup, and a lot of schools are doing a homeschool program, or the students are studying at home. We also apply this intervention in our schools, quote unquote, at home. So you have here students. It has to be implemented. It has to be positive. So you minimize punishment. Everything that is connected with punishment reduces punishment. So punishment is avoided. But there are different types of punishment. But that is beyond the scope of discussion, and that would take a long time to discuss. So I'm going to park that discussion. And then it is to reduce also dropout rate. In a lot of countries, truancy is a problem. If you have positive behavior supports, you will be able to minimize this dropout problem. And of course, PBS has a lot of interventions. Okay? So, what are the themes in the literature that I have gathered? First, structured intervention that is mostly evidence-based. And they have their a listing of evidence-based intervention. It's mostly used in school-wide programs. If they would be implementing a behavior intervention, they implement it to everyone. And then it is used for regular students and students with disabilities. Of course, the variations in intervention is always taken into consideration when you use a specific intervention technique. So, what are examples of positive behavior supports? First is to structure the environment. If you are at home, there should be a space that is exclusively designed. It is exclusively devoted to studying. You don't sleep there. You don't eat there. There's a space for studying. There's a play nook. There's a work nook. There's a reading nook. We don't mix activities in a specific space, especially if we are dealing with young children. They have to understand that this is a study space. You don't play here, you don't sleep here, you study here. Next is to position the furniture to ensure smooth transitions. If you are at school, you would have a classroom layout of where you would put your furniture. Where is the teacher's table? Where are the chairs? Where is the circle time area? You have all of these areas properly mapped out. But we are now in an era wherein we have to do all the school activities inside the home. So at home also, my dear teachers, you can coach the parents on how to structure. If there are too much distractions, for example, there are clothes around, there are toys around, naturally the child won't able to focus. So it's a matter of eliminating these distractions from the sight of the student whenever you have classes. And then sit the students near the peers who model appropriate behavior. This can be done if your country already has face-to-face classes. And then also you can sit these students who are having problems beside or near the teacher so that the teacher could easily remind the student that there is misbehavior that is happening. Next, teach behavior expectations. We plan, we teach, and we practice expected behavior. The best teacher is a good model. Teachers and parents model behavior towards their children. I was talking earlier on a webinar on positive support, psychosocial supports for children who are at risk for drug abuse. That holds true. Children would always copy behaviors of parents and teachers. They have role models. So we plan, we teach, and we practice expected behaviors. We also plan, teach, and practice routines and procedures. It is very important that we have routines, especially now in the new normal when everything is done at home. The students should be used to routines. If they are used and they have mastered these routines, they would be able to perform behavior clearly. Next, of course, if you have the routine, you reinforce and you reteach and you practice these routine procedures throughout the year, especially if you have a child with delays, with developmental delays. These routines have to be retaught because they can forget it if you don't teach and reteach. And then you monitor the classroom, or you monitor the classroom environment at home, and you frequently check in with the students. It is always important that you check in. In the literature, check-in sessions are very much appreciated during the new normal. You can check in, for example, on emotions. How do you feel? You can also make a check in on the things that they are hoping for. You can do a check in on the blessings that they have encountered during the day. There is an activity called the three blessings exercises that is grounded on positive psychology of Dr. Martin Seligman, and you reminisce the three blessings that have occurred during the day. Now, we are in a pandemic situation. You would say, why are you talking about blessings when we are in a pandemic? You could have the exercise silver linings. So, what are the things that made you smile during this very difficult day? Remember, if you are having a difficult day, or if a student is having a difficult day, I always teach this to students. If you are having a difficult day is not consistent 24/7. Within 24 hours, you would not feel sad all the time. You would not feel pain all the time. There are some circumstances or situations or events that would make you laugh or become hopeful. So you identify all of these and you savor these activities in order for you to have a better outlook during this pandemic. Next, you monitor frequently. So check-ins are very important. You check in also on how the students understand the lesson. For example, what are the difficulties? Sometimes misbehavior can emanate from the fact that the students do not understand the lesson well. So you can always check in with the students in order for them to, quote unquote, behave properly when you are teaching. Next is to partner with the families. Of course, whatever you teach as a teacher has to be reinforced at home. So you gather information about the student. That is a form of assessment. You engage with the family. You work with the family in order to address specific behaviors or learning gaps. You work with the family. You check on how the family handles the misbehaviors. For example, there are things at home that can reinforce the behavior, or there are inconsistencies in rules. So that would make a child confused. You have to have consistency of rules. So you have to work with families when it comes to guidelines in behavior, rules, or interventions that will be implemented. Next is to have parent coaching on what to do with the behavior. So parents do not have an education degree. Most of them don't have an education degree. You have to teach them what to do at home. You have to list down the things that they have to do. If possible, if there are a lot of steps, have a video and send the video to the parents in order for them to have these interventions done. And then follow up with families. So when you give the intervention, follow up the families. Check if they are doing things correctly and check whether or not the student is improving in behavior. And then we recognize and we regulate emotions. Even for young children, behavior, emotions can be regulated. Let us understand that behaviors have a biological origin. Something is happening to the neurons, for example. That's why you are producing an emotion. Something is happening, for example, with the amygdala if a person is undergoing depression. So emotions have a biological origin. And in the literature, it states that unregulated emotions would cause you a lot of mental health issues. That's why we regulate emotions. And there are strategies to regulate these emotions. So here are some strategies. I'm going to talk to you about the feelings wheel, and this is effective for young children. But I also have a version of feelings wheel for adolescents, young adults, and adults. Role playing is very essential. This is a very effective technique if you are dealing with young children. Next, you have to recognize the presence of the emotion and you describe the emotion without judgment or prejudice. So I have an exercise for that. There are mindfulness strategies that you can do. For example, you could do um, breathing exercise, you could do body scans, you could do a guided imagery exercises, and all of these can be found on YouTube. And then you monitor emotions. Later on, I have an activity, I have a chart on how to monitor these emotions. And then you identify and assess thoughts and behaviors that come with the emotion. So this is practical cognitive behavior therapy in play. And we reward good behavior. If we are teachers and parents, we reward the good behavior that the students are showing us. So first activity would be the hot cross bun. So this would be used for adolescents. This could also be used for adults. So let us remember that whenever we have an emotion, it is situated in an environment. For example, Norita is walking down the street and then she sees her best friend Sam. Norita would say, "Hi, Sam," and then the best friend would just walk away. So what would be the thought of Norita? Oh, that's Sam. What did I do with her? Perhaps she's angry with me. And then Norita will have a bad day. So that would be a depressed mood, that would be an angry mood, and that would create a physiological response. Oh, my heart is palpitating. I feel that my blood pressure is rising. I feel that I'm nervous. I feel that my pulse is racing. There's a physiological response. And there would be a behavioral response. Oh, I'm gonna punch you when I see you because you don't like me anymore, or I will change best friends. So let us remember that every thought produces a mood, a feeling, an emotion. There's a physiological response and there's a behavioral response. We have to consider whatever we think of. I also teach young children, I teach adolescents about emotions, on how they could control these emotions. So the hot cross bun is one example. This is based on cognitive behavior therapy. For children, instead of them punching or instead of them crying or throwing a fit, I let them use a feelings wheel to communicate. So, for example, I would tell them, okay, if your classmate takes your food during recess time, what would you do? Some would say I would cry. Some would say I would punch my classmate. Some would say I would yank my food right out of my classmate's bag. So instead of doing that behavior that could warrant you a detention, a demerit, or whatever, you could use the feelings wheel. So for example, Andy, I don't like what you did. I'm angry at you. So I'm angry at you. I'm mad at you because you took my food. So in that way, the child was able to express his or her emotions, but he or she expressed the emotions in a more positive way. So the feelings wheel is used. Similarly, parents can also use the feelings wheel. Among Asians, some of the parents do corporal punishment. So they spank or whatever they do, or sometimes they shout at their kids. So instead of you shouting, instead of you yelling, you can use the feelings wheel to communicate with your child your frustration or your anger on whatever the behavior was. So you could use the feelings wheel to communicate instead of you shouting and showing negative emotions to your child. Well, about negative emotions in the literature, it says that negative emotions weigh heavier than positive emotions. Therefore, if you're feeling happy and then someone rains on your parade or you receive a bad news, that bad news will linger throughout the day. So it's very much important to recognize that there are negative emotions, but you don't let them overwhelm you. This is a more complicated feelings wheel for adolescents to adults. Sometimes adolescents would tell me, I am overwhelmed. I don't know what I feel. It's all over my body and it's outside my body. So we will analyze the situation and we will identify which among the emotions do you feel here. Feelings wheels are available online. So you could download and you can just print it out and just use it. So I let them identify the feelings that they have. And then I talk about the feelings and I talk about how they could just describe the feeling without judgment or prejudice. Just describe it. Okay? They're just there. You just describe it. Don't let the feeling overwhelm you. For younger kids, we role play. So it's also applicable for older kids or adolescents. But for example, what will you do if your classmate, you are going to play already in the playground? Let's say, for example, you will play with a swing, and then your classmate suddenly cuts and rides on the swing instead of you riding on the swing. So we will have a role play of things to do. In that way, you teach the child how to problem solve. This is a behavior chart on monitoring emotions. So, for example, what are the behavioral expectations? I listened to when teacher was talking. I followed teacher's directions. So you have here a behavior chart wherein the child also could monitor. You have the teacher giving the mark of whether the child was able to listen all day, most of the day, or only part of the day. And take note that this is done Monday to Friday. If you are at a home setup, you can use the behavior chart from Monday to Sunday. So I stayed on task to complete my work and did my best. I raised my hand to speak. So these are the expectations that are very clear for the child. And of course, after completing this behavior chart with very good marks, you give a reward. So what reward could you give to the child? Is it a very good, a praise? Is it a tangible? Okay, I will give you your favorite toy, small items. So small items could be used as a reward. So whatever that reward is, you have to coordinate, for example, with the parents or you coordinate with the teachers. So whatever the reward is up to you. And of course, it is also dependent on the behaviors and of course the efforts that the child gave. Next is to identify and assess the thoughts that are connected with the emotion. So this is a more advanced exercise and this could also be used for adults and teachers. So there are unhelpful thinking styles. These are called cognitive distortions in cognitive behavior therapy. So a lot of times we have a bad mood because we reason out emotionally or we jump to conclusions or we label ourselves, I'm stupid, I'm bad, I'm ugly. So these are labels that we put to ourselves, or we magnify an issue or we minimize an issue. Sometimes there would be shoulds and must. I must do this. I must get a 100 all the time in all my quizzes in order for my parents to be happy. What if you don't get 100? What if sometimes you make a mistake? Would you have a lower sense of self worth if you do so? So these are unhelpful thinking styles, and these interfere or these make us have uh, ill behavior. This could make you depressed. This could make you feel anxious. This could make you feel angry. And of course, if you look at the hot cross bun, you will have a specific behavioral response. So think of these unhelpful thinking styles. These are also called cognitive distortions. If you are to assess the veracity or the logical consistency of a specific thought, it is very important that you use the worry decision tree. So again, this is a cognitive behavior therapy exercise. So notice that worry. When you say worry, it is connected with anxiety. Anxiety is connected with worry. When you say depression, it is connected with sadness. So we have here, this is called the worry decision tree. So ask yourself, what am I worrying about? Okay? And then ask, can I do something about it? I don't have any money for my tuition. Can I do something about it? Or my best friend is not talking to me. Is it something that you can do? So if yes, you do an action plan. Okay, I'm going to talk to my best friend. Okay, I'm going to look for ways and means to earn money during this quarantine season. So we define the problem. What is this all about? If you can find the solution and do it now and let the worry go. If you cannot do it now, do it at a specific time. Calendar the date wherein you would start it. So you start doing that activity, have an action plan, and then let the worry go away. Of course, if there is nothing you can do about it, you accept it and you let the worry go. You change the focus of your attention. For example, in this pandemic situation, what are the things that you cannot control? You cannot control that COVID is in the country and COVID is in most parts of the world. You accept that it is here, but you do not accept that you will just stay at home and do nothing. Something can be done. You just accept the fact that it is here and we have to work around the situation. We have to practice physical distancing, we have to wear face masks, face shields. We have to do all of these in order to make ourselves healthy. These are the things that we can control. Remember, in worry and in most of the behaviors that are emotional in nature, you can only focus on the things that you can control. And if you cannot control it, just let the worry go away. You change the focus of your attention and you go towards problem solving. We reward good behavior. We have a token economy, and if the child has done a good job, there is a specific reward. So let's remember, in giving rewards, there are different kinds of rewards. There are tangible rewards, there are non material rewards. So, whatever this behavior is, reward a behavior immediately if there is a good job done. So, rewarding. And of course, when you reward, sometimes even in teaching, if a student was able to solve a very good problem, we would say, good job. So you say it with emotions. You don't say, oh, good job. The child has to feel it. You have to be with the student. In the literature right now, the presence of a teacher in the virtual class is very important. So the students need to feel the presence. It's not enough that you attend classes every day. Your presence has to be felt. You have to know. The students have to know that you are there. You are there caring for them. And the students would be able to read that behavior if you show them support, if you check in on them, if you say that you support them, if you spend extra hours teaching them a difficult lesson or tutoring them one on one if they ask you, they would recognize that and eventually they would be more task compliant towards you. Okay? So remember also, this is a practical problem solving approach that I do in counseling. So this is very practical. Remember, this is geared towards problem solving. It is not on processing emotions. Okay? So this is very practical. It's not on existentialism. You don't do this to find the meaning of life. You don't do this for severe distress. This is for problems that have to be solved. So let's take, for example, this situation. So first is to identify the problem. What is the problem? My friend is not talking to me. So define it. Clearly define the parameters of the problem. Define how it affects you. My friend is not talking to me. I'm having difficulty. I can't sleep anymore. Okay? So what are the solutions? Okay? How would you identify specific solutions for the problem? You have to look for a solution and you apply the solution to that specific problem in order for you to modify the behavior. Now, if the chosen solution doesn't work, you have to find another solution and then eventually you evaluate if this behavior or if this problem is being solved. So this is a practical problem solving approach to it's a practical counseling problem solving approach. You identify the problem, you define the parameters of the problem, you identify possible solutions to the problem, and then you modify behavior by applying this. And if it doesn't work, you find another solution. So this is a very practical problem solving approach. Okay? So with that, I would open now the floor to some questions, and I would like to thank you for listening. The most interesting part is, of course, the question and answer portion. Thanks, Swati.
Thank you so much, Dr. Grace. That was such an informative session. I'm pretty sure that all the attendees today must have benefited hearing from you. Before I proceed to the questions, like you said, questions definitely is the most interesting part of the session because people have a lot of things to ask from. But before that, I would like to inform our attendees that if they wish to register for the next webinar from Ability, which would be around why handwriting is important for learning and memory, they could use the link being shared in the chat box right now. Also, if they wish to register for the next workshop by Ma'am Bala Saraswati, which would be around addressing comprehension difficulties faced by children with special needs, they could use the link being shared in the chat box. Okay, so moving on to the questions segment. The first question that we have is from Teresa Rovi, and you have already covered this in such great detail during your presentation. Although I would still like to put the question forward, which says if you could share some approaches and strategies for addressing and handling behavioral concerns during virtual sessions or when the child is spending so much time at home because of the pandemic.
Okay, thank you very much, Swati, for that question. I find that very interesting because there are a lot of behavioral challenges encountered by parents of children with special needs at home. So, first and foremost, we have to assess what are these behavioral challenges because you cannot have a one size fits all solution to all of these problems. So, one very practical approach that I would suggest is to identify these behavioral challenges. What are the functions of these behavioral challenges? And according to applied behavior analysis, these are the functions of behavior: attention, escape, tangibles, and sensory. So there's sensorial stimulation. So, what are the behavioral challenges that you face? Observe them. What is the function of the behavior? Do they cry because they want attention? Or do they cry because they have a very difficult task and they want to escape the task? So you have to identify first the functions of behavior. So first and foremost, in order for you to have smooth sailing, quote unquote, a smooth sailing class, whether it be online or a home-based class, you have to let the child understand behavioral expectations. For young children, there are some classroom rules that I see, and these are very effective in preschool classes. So you have their watchful eyes, behave hands, listening ears, and quiet mouth. So if the teacher is able to model watchful eyes, eyes on teacher, watchful eyes on the monitor, listening ears, you listen attentively. Quiet mouth, mouth is shut. Behaved hands, hands on the table. If the teacher or the parent is able to model this, you would establish a behavior pattern. So this is a very simple technique that I am sharing to you that could be used. It's a simple behavior management technique. And there are more techniques.
Totally. That was really helpful. Hope the parents and also the educators benefit from that. Okay. Then the next question that I have is from Judith. Judith is saying, what is the best way to manage misbehavior? Or I would like to club that with a question from Emeraldo also, how to deal with non-compliance behaviors. So misbehavior or non-compliance behaviors, how to manage that better, and especially when it is demonstrated by teens.
Okay, teens. So first, misbehavior. If you have misbehavior of children, First is to model the appropriate behavior. So you can do it via role play, you can practice, and of course, you have to know the functions of the behavior, because if you punish, for example, for children, and you give a timeout and you say sit on the corner, or you say you won't be able to do the task, you go out of the classroom, or go out of the virtual class, the student might enjoy actually your punishment, because the behavior is escape. The function of the behavior is to escape a difficult task. So first and foremost, identify what causes that behavior. So if it is a misbehavior by a teenager, is it misbehavior because, number one, he or she wants to avoid the task? So what will you do? Or the child is getting your attention. Some teens also would get satisfied if you get angry in class, and that is the goal of the student, for you to be angry. So what is the function of the behavior? You have to identify first the function of the behavior, and then think of the solutions to the problem. So also I gave you problem solving approaches on how to think of possible solutions to the problem. So there is no one size fits all for this discussion, but it's very much important to establish the behavior that you want to expect, to model it, to have role playing situation in order for you to address these concerns.
Right. Okay, so like you were just saying that during classes, some teachers may send the children out. I have another related question, because the gathering today has a lot of educators and teachers, and they are asking if you don't want to punish the children, but how to manage children who are very, very talkative during the sessions, or while the teacher is talking. So how to effectively manage this kind of behavior?
Okay, so there comes now the concept of waiting time for very talkative students, and turn taking. So there could be practice before the class. So at home, for example, you let the parents, for example, say, okay, you have turn taking. So we have a conversation, and then we keep quiet, and then we take turns. Second, we could also have a classroom rule that if you want to talk, you raise your hand. Let me acknowledge you first before you talk. You cannot start talking in class. So these are some simple rules to address some students who are very talkative.
Right. Some simple rules could prove out to be really effective, Dr. Grace. Thank you for your
Yes.
suggestions. Okay, the next one that I have is from Zireen. Zireen is asking if we have followed a particular technique or we have tried a particular intervention, what is the average time to check back if the intervention that the parent or the professional has tried is working fine, or if the intervention is okay?
Okay, if you're talking about evidence-based intervention, you would have the specific time when a behavior would change. So
Right.
it depends on a specific behavior. It depends also on the severity condition. So, for example, if it is at the very severe level, it would take a longer time. If, for example, that behavior has been in existence for 10 years already, it would be very difficult to modify. I'm not talking about extinguishing it. It's modification. It's very difficult because you have had the behavior for 10 years already as compared to a behavior that is just starting. So
Right.
my answer would depend on how long has the behavior been observed, how frequent has the behavior been observed, what is the level of severity if it is a person with disability. So you have to take this into consideration in order for you to say that, okay, it's time to shift gears, it's time to change intervention. And also, you look at the literature, because the literature would have a prescriptive time. So it's always best to go for evidence-based intervention.
Totally. So evidence-based interventions could work well. The next question is from Casadendra. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing your name incorrectly, but the question is interesting. She's asking that how could you help a non-verbal child to regulate his emotions? He scratches, hits, and goes on a rampage when the child gets angry. Peck cards, verbal instructions, or rewards, nothing seems to work. The mom has finally resorted to hitting as the last means for reducing the behavior and to subdue him during his meltdowns. So, if you could answer that, what could be the best way to manage this?
Okay, so first and foremost, I heard the word meltdowns. There's a difference between tantrums and meltdowns. If you say it's a tantrum, there are reasons for that misbehavior. For example, the child is having a tantrum because the mother did not buy the toy that the child was pointing at in the mall. And then the child suddenly cries, and then um, some would call it shake, rattle, and roll because the child would be rolling on the floor. So the child would be doing that. That is a tantrum because there are reasons for that behavior. Meltdowns are sensorial in nature. So, for example, there could be a meltdown if there is sensory overload. If you have a child with autism and then you bring him or her to a crowded place, there could be a sensory overload. So he would be crying or throwing a fit. So that would be a meltdown. There was a sensory overload. So you take the child away from the noisy condition. Also, you have to observe when the behavior is occurring because the behavior will not occur 24/7. There are reasons behind that. And you have to know and observe keenly the reasons why the child is doing that. That also might be a signal that he or she is using that to get what he or she wants from you. So always remember the functions of behavior: attention, escape, tangibles, and sensorial experiences. So these are some guiding principles that you would do. Observe the behavior first, identify what is that function of behavior. Why is this child misbehaving? What happens? Does the child have a pattern of misbehavior or does it just occur? So you have to find out, and there are reasons to that. And then when you have identified the reasons, we go to specific interventions that could cater to the need of the child. There is incomplete information about it. So I could answer first in general terms. So my suggestion would be to have an assessment before other interventions take place.
Yeah, so functions of behavior seems to be the most important learning that people from here would be taking from them. The next question that I have is from Jayati, Jutlin, and Intan. All of these people are asking if there is a way to break the established routine of a child with autism and change into a new or positive one, and especially because of the online classes, if the entire routine and discipline has gone erratic, how to settle this?
Yes, it's a matter of explaining and introducing new routines. So you have to we are in an online class. This is your routine. If possible, write down the routine. If the child cannot read, could there be pictures and explain each of the pictures? Explain the sequences of events because sometimes children with autism, if they do not understand what is happening during the day, they would, of course, misbehave. So they have to understand first, and you have to guide them calmly that these are the expectations within the day. So with that, hopefully, misbehavior would be minimized.
So, thank you, Dr. Grace. The questions are pouring into the chat box. Dear participants, I'm trying to take as many of them as much as possible. Given the limited period of time, we may not be able to address all the questions that you have been asking, but hope you'll get answers to some of these questions by visiting the Ability platform, which has hundreds of useful resources which might answer some of your questions, and also sessions from some of the past experts. The next question that is from LA. LA is asking if there is a way to deal with students who are undergoing severe anxiety or are having panic attacks. How do we pull such students out from thoughts that might lead to depression or something like that?
Okay, so first let's differentiate anxiety from depression. If you say anxiety, the key feature here is worry. You are palpitating because of that worry. If you say depression, the key feature here is sadness. But you can have both anxiety and depression. But let's distinguish this first. So let's talk about anxiety. So first is number one, you can have breathing exercises. And when you breathe, you do it exaggeratedly. So that when a student is already having an anxiety attack, the student is shaking, you can have a brown bag. I have a brown bag here. You can have a brown bag and let the student breathe through that brown bag. So that would help if the student is already having an anxiety attack. A brown bag would help. Breathing exercises would work. The good thing about panic attacks is that they stop. So there's a beginning and there's an end. Now the end, I don't know what time because there's no specific time. Some panic attacks would take a few minutes and some would take for hours. The longest that I have encountered was 12 hours. And the student was crying and the student was unable to control herself. So panic attacks do have a beginning and they do have an end. That's the good thing about it. Now, breathing exercises would help manage that. Okay. So also the literature also says that you have to have exercise. They say that a 30-minute exercise, I'm calling from the happiness lab of Yale University, a 30-minute exercise is equivalent to taking one Zoloft pill. Zoloft is an antidepressant. So there's value in exercise. There's value in eating well. There's value in sleeping well because that would help the brain rest. There's also value in establishing a routine. There's also value in knowing, being in control of what you are doing. I have a practical exercise also for anxiety. It's called objectification of emotions. For example, anxiety. If anxiety were an object, what would this be? Some would say it's an electric fan or it's a cloud. It's a big cloud that it follows me all day long. So what is the color of this cloud? It's gray, it's black, it's red, etc. What is the texture of this cloud, this electric fan, this chain ball? Oh, it's rough, it's smooth, it's jagged. And then I would say, what is the sound of this object? Oh, it says click, 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 click. What's the sound? So I would ask them to objectify the emotion. Instead of you feeling anxiety that is very ambiguous inside your body, you now have an object to focus. Can you look at that object, that blanket, that chain ball, that black cloud in your head? So you look at it, look at the color, focus on the texture, focus on the size, focus on the density, focus on the sound instead of that anxiety. So you're now drawing away attention from something that is unknown to something that is more concrete, thinking of that object in the head. And then what do you do? Could you make it bigger for me? Could you make it smaller, smaller, much smaller, smaller, smaller? So until that becomes a routine. Whenever the student would feel anxiety, worry, depression, the student would think about that object and immediately would focus attention from that anxiety or depression or sadness that is very ambiguous to something that is very concrete inside in his or her mind. So you focus on that and then eventually instead of you feeling that anxiety, it becomes automatic that you focus on these mindfulness exercise. It's a mindfulness strategy. It's objectification of emotions. So I hope that helps because that has helped a lot of people with anxiety, and I do that for counseling cases. When it comes to anxiety, when it comes to fears, when comes to something that they cannot control.
Knowledge is indeed very powerful, Dr. Grace, and I'm pretty sure by sharing your knowledge, you have empowered so many people who are listening to this session today.
Oh, yeah.
Since
Swati,
we
I
are
have
running,
something in the chat box. It says, is it the same object? You let the person choose the object. you let the person choose the object. What does it represent? Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Dr. Grace, for addressing that. We are running short of time, so I would be taking two last questions for today. The second last question that I have is from Aswati Vijay. Aswati is asking us if ignoring the tantrums will cause any harm to the child, and if one should do or do not do that.
Okay, that is a very good question. So first and foremost, we have to think of the safety of the child. So when you ignore a tantrum, you are sure that this tantrum, the function is attention, or the function is a tangible reward. So you are ignoring it. So you have to make sure first what is the function of that behavior. And number two, you have to make sure that the child is in a safe place. And also, you have to make sure that the child is not displaying self harm, because there are children who do self harm. So if that does not work, you try another strategy aside from planned ignoring. Planned ignoring is very effective, especially if you are in the classroom and the child, for example, would just want to catch the attention of everyone. Like I was in a classroom and then the child said, teacher, I have a question. And then the teacher calls on the child, you know what, teacher, you look like a horse. And then everyone started laughing. So there's a function. The child is misbehaving because the child wants the teacher to get angry. So always look at the functions of behavior.
The most important lesson that I am taking away from this session is definitely functions of behavior. I have the deeper understanding of this. Okay, coming to the last question for today. This is from Wayne Policarpio. Wayne is asking us, or in fact telling us, my child always berates or blames himself for mistakes he makes. However, if the mistakes are even trivial, we always explain that people make mistakes all the time, and what is important is to keep trying, but the child still thinks that he's a failure, and that makes the child really sad. So how do we deal with this behavior?
Okay, so thank you very much, because that has to be dealt with. Otherwise, depression is very imminent. First and foremost, what are the previous successes of the child? So you look at all the previous successes. You have here an unhelpful thinking style. And the antidote to that is to find a logical evidence that it is wrong. So you have to find an evidence in the past. What successes did you previously have? And when you have identified these successes, you ask the child, how were you able to succeed? Now, meeting the future, meeting whatever is at present, you ask the child, why do you think that you will not succeed? Isn't it that previously you used this technique? Would you try this technique first before you say that you would be a failure? So let's try to use this technique first. We could model, we could have a role play, we could have a list of the things that we could do. So these are the things to prevent this unhelpful thinking style from happening. And of course, you have to also let the child, if there are too many unhelpful thinking styles, it would be best to have a journal to list down all of this unhelpful thinking, and then you put the thought on trial. What are the evidences for it and what are the evidences against it? This is called thoughts on trial. So you list down all the evidences that are for it and against it. Chances are there are more evidences against it. You have to be with the child when you work with on this exercise, thoughts on trial.
Great. That's really interesting and informative. Thank you so much, Dr. Grace. That was indeed a very informative and fruitful session. And since we have approached the end of session timings, so although I don't want to do it, but I would have to end the session. But before doing that, I would like to remind all our attendees that if you wish to attend the future webinar or workshop from Ability, please find the link in the chat box. What I would also like to remind you guys is while webinars are more informative in nature, they are more generic in the topics they cover. Whereas in workshops, we cover more practical tips and strategies for specific topics. And now with the premium membership access being granted to members who are interested in workshops, you can simply go to the Ability website and register for workshops so that you become a premium member of Ability. Thank you so much once again, Dr. Grace. What and how do you feel about today's session?
Well, I had a blast in today's session. Thank you very much for asking these questions because we learn from each other. Enjoy the upcoming sessions of Everyday.
Totally, totally. Everyone who has joined the session today had so much to learn from you. Even I did. So thank you so much for your very valuable and precious time. Dear people, if you liked today's session, do not forget to share your feedback with us and also share your feedback for any scope of improvement that we might have as a team. And we would definitely work on improving it further for you all. Thank you so much for joining us today. That brings us to the end of today's session.